Comey and Brennan face the wrath of justice. Let's check it out. Tonight, all these years later, we could finally see justice for those heavy, deep state body blows that our intelligence agencies delivered to the Trump campaign and the first term of his presidency. Who could ever forget Russiagate? The years-long investigation into a completely manufactured collusion between Trump and Vladimir Putin to steal the 2016 election, based almost exclusively on a dossier which, long after the fact, we found out was paid for by Trump's political opponent, Hillary Clinton. It's the craziest story. The dossier claimed that Putin had cultivated Trump as an asset for years, and the Kremlin had filthy, dirty secrets about Trump, which they would use to control him as president, and we would all be under Russian control. And with that, Democrats and the media immediately labeled Trump a fake president right out of the gate of that first term. The media went ballistic and crippled the first half of Trump's first term with non-stop, salacious coverage of a total lie.
Breaking news in the Russia investigation dominates the program tonight and reaches directly into the president's inner circle.
We are covering the breaking news that Bob Mueller, the special counsel investigating ties between Donald Trump's campaign and Russia.
Donald Trump is an unwitting agent of Russia's Vladimir Putin.
There was collusion between the Trump campaign and Putin.
Whether Donald Trump himself is just a puppet for the Kremlin.
Now, to get to that point, the dossier needed a lot of cheerleaders, the fake dossier did, and there was no greater than CIA Director John Brennan, who vigorously pushed for the dossier to be used in the intelligence community assessment, despite the fact that senior CIA experts, some of the smartest guys that he was overseeing on Russia, told him it was insane to do that. He did it anyway. A recent CIA review of Brennan found he had a preference for narrative consistency over analytical soundness. Oh, so you're really not a CIA director at all. You're just a propagandist. In 2016, Brennan ran to Obama with the dossier, and the former president ordered a rushed intelligence assessment to be completed before Trump's inauguration. All this happening during the transition. A Hail Mary to potentially derail Trump's inauguration. Didn't do that, but it did end up crippling the first 2 years of his presidency. And just a few months later, a very crafty Brennan, who was a devout communist in college, downplayed his reliance on the dossier that he so aggressively pushed.
I know that there were efforts made by the Bureau to try to understand whether or not any of the information in that was valid, but I don't have any first-hand knowledge of it. It wasn't part of the corpus of intelligence information that we had. It was not in any way used as a basis for the intelligence community assessment that was done.
So Brennan knew it was filthy opposition research. That's what the dossier was, literally paid for by the one woman that Trump was going up against in the election. The narrative that was destroying Trump's presidency couldn't just be based on that, right? You couldn't just base it off of that because he knew what it really was. He knew what it was before anyone else. So he came out and he tried to downplay it before everybody else found out that this was just Oppo research, right? The problem was that he said all that under oath. And it's now become a serious liability for the former head of the CIA, under investigation now for perjury, lying to Congress. And then there's James Comey, the FBI director at the time. So you have the CIA director, you have the FBI director. These are the two at the time. Also now under investigation, the allegations against him, more vague. Like Brennan, Comey also demanded the dirty dossier be included in the widely trusted intel assessment and concealed what he knew about the dossier and its origins to keep a false narrative about the president alive and going. Comey did that. Then earlier this year, Comey reminded Americans just how inappropriate it was for him to ever be anywhere near the top of the American intelligence apparatus. This guy was the FBI director, and he posted a picture online of shells he claims he found at the beach. I still maintain he sat there and lined all those up for 2 hours because he had nothing else to do. 8647 from an FBI director that served briefly under Donald Trump. These are bad dudes. Remember what they did to General Michael Flynn in their desperation to prove their lies about Trump might really be true. What he had communications with Russia during the transition. Every single administration does that. They destroyed his life. Remember from the Durham report, the FBI was not able to corroborate a single substantive allegation contained in the Steele reports despite protracted efforts to do so. That's how fake this all was. The president responded to this new investigation into these two today.
Well, I know nothing about it other than what I read today, but I will tell you, I think they're very dishonest people. I think they're crooked as hell, and maybe they have to pay a price for that. I believe they are truly bad people and dishonest people, so whatever happens, happens.
All right, Senator Eric Schmidt is on the Judiciary Committee and joins us now. And sir, good to have you on. Let's start and talk about and just kind of remind everybody of the impact, what that dossier did to the first term of the Trump presidency. And I guess we'll start with John Brennan, who appears to be in the most trouble as it stands tonight. How do you see this? What do you think could happen to him? What should he face?
Well, clearly there needs to be a real investigation into his efforts and Comey's efforts, really to sabotage the Trump campaign. And then once he came into office, this cloud of this ridiculous Russiagate sort of loomed over the administration in the early days of the administration, and that was the intent. And so I just think the idea that you were spying on a presidential candidate and then continued these lies into the administration, there has to be some accountability. And the other thing that's true, Rob, is that if President Trump wouldn't have mounted this historic comeback, which is what this was, right? I mean, we've never seen anything like this in our lifetime, where a president who was in office then comes back for a non-consecutive term. All this stuff would continue to be brushed under the rug by the legacy media and the Democrats. You wouldn't have any accountability for any of this stuff that I think we're kind of getting to. But this really reeks of corruption of the worst kind when you have the head of these kinds of agencies leading in really an espionage effort against the president of the United States. It doesn't get much more terrible than that.
Yeah, I mean, they took such a swing, and it's,
Yeah.
If you're going to take that swing, you better make sure that you knock the guy out, and they didn't, and you're right. I mean, he managed to come back all these years later, and now they've got the tools that they need to actually dig into this thing and figure out. I mean, Brennan, included the Steele dossier in this intelligence community assessment. He was warned and when he was director of the CIA, he was warned by many people that this was not a credible dossier. This is not something you should be leaning on. He leaned on it anyways, and then he came back and under oath marginalized how much emphasis he put on it, even though you have plenty of evidence that he really pushed it. I mean, he told the president of the United States about this. He was pushing this thing every chance he got, and then when they got caught and they knew that it was filthy and they knew that it was Oppo research for Hillary Clinton, he tried to marginalize that under oath. Is that where I think is that the biggest charge in your mind? The fact that he tried to cover up and lie about it?
I think that's where it's all headed. And by the way, Barack Obama ought to be thanking his lucky stars for that presidential immunity case that came down about a year ago. That President Trump's legal team, John Sauer, who's now the Solicitor General of the United States, argued, because who knows what you'd find there. But I think that's the right place to look. And let's not also forget that going into the re-election campaign of 2020, the same intelligence community with different actors involved, really the deep state of the deep state then, was claiming that the Hunter Biden laptop story was just Russian disinformation, again, trying to associate President Trump with that kind of efforts, even though they knew it was real. The FBI knew it was real. When we took Elvis Chan's deposition in the Missouri versus Biden case I handled on the censorship enterprise that they had established, they were trying to pre-bunk the story. They knew it was Hunter Biden's laptop, yet they were telling people that it was going to be a Russian hack and leak operation. So this whole thing that went on for years to try to discredit Trump, I think all of this stuff has to come to light now, because we can never let this happen again. So it's time, I think, for a sort of clean house here.
We really did discover that, and it took the former president, the first presidency, the first term of the Trump presidency, to figure out just how, I don't think I ever really was aware of just how much control over everything, these intelligence agencies have. And it's almost like they got to choose. It's not really a democracy. They could put their finger on scales and make sure that things happen.
Yeah, and I think also, again, the uniqueness of this comeback provides some perspective now for President Trump and his team. Think about it. He now has the full sort of like information and knowledge of what went on a few years past. He had to go through hell, literally. They're trying to put him in jail for the rest of his life and bankrupt his family. So he survived not just the criminal and civil litigation, but then the electoral math to win in a landslide. But the ability to put his team together and have fresh eyes on something like this, I'm not sure you would have seen that in a consecutive term, right?
Yeah.
You're dealing with COVID and everything else that was going on. And so you look at all the momentum we've got right now with the big, beautiful bill and all these other things. I think a lot of people are nervous for their corrupt actions from a few years ago, and they probably should be.
Is there efforts that you're seeing from people like John Ratcliffe and Kash Patel to clean out this rot inside of our intel agencies? Because if they just move through and then in 3 years we get a Democrat in the White House, it's nothing will change.
Well, it's interesting. These are some of the questions. I'm on the Judiciary Committee when we had Kash Patel's confirmation hearing. I think he has a very unique perspective because he was also a target of these efforts to discredit and to smear and the weaponization of government. You also had a lot of people that are high-ranking members now of the Justice Department that went through that as well. Remember, the Biden administration, they were trying to purge anybody that had anything to do with MAGA or the Trump administration. They were going after people, making sure they couldn't get jobs in the private sector. I mean, this was really a mean-spirited campaign to destroy the lives of a lot of people. Now, guess what happened? Those people now are in positions of authority to actually restore trust amongst the American people. This isn't about paybacks. It never has been, nor it should be. What it is about is restoring the trust that was lost through the weaponization of government to the likes we've never seen before in the history of this country.
Something else. Senator Schmidt, good to see you. Thank you.
Anytime, Rob.